What's poppin', Caped Crusaders? It's me, MT, and welcome back to the Heavy Spoiler Show, y'all. Spoilers for Season 1 of Batman Caped Crusader coming your way because we have got to talk about this series ending as well as all the Easter eggs sprinkled between. So join me in the breakdown mobile and let's get into it, gang. Alright, so let us talk about the ending to a season of a show that I hope gets infinite seasons because good God have I missed some good quality Bruce Timm Batman. I was a huge fan of Timm's DC animated works growing up, so getting to watch this new season of Caped Crusader was truly a gift. And after this season ends with Harvey Dent's death after sacrificing his life to save Barbara Gordon, the last scene of the season ends with us visiting a run-down shack filled with the deceased and tied-up remains of pale, smiling white people, with the only alive one among them laughing his ass off before giving up his giggly ghost as well. And watching this happen is none other than Batman's arch-nemesis, the Joker, who made his first appearance as the Joker in 1940's Batman #1 alongside his famous Joker Venom, with this Venom of course being responsible for the deaths of all of these people. The Joker of this universe appears to be an experienced chemist of sorts, as we can see a variety of tubes and beakers to his right. So it's pretty safe to say that this Joker was using these people as science experiments in order to perfect the formula for his Joker toxin before starting his career as Batman's favorite foe. And this is very much in line with Joker's very first appearances in the Golden Age Batman comics, as we learn that Joker used to be a lab worker before turning to a life of crime as first the Red Hood and then the villain known as the Joker. So it seems that this series will be leaning a whole lot into that lab worker angle during a potential season 2. And even though we don't see a whole lot of the Joker during these final moments, much like the designs for most of the season's main cast of characters, this Joker's design feels deeply inspired by the Golden Age version of the Joker character. So definitely expect the Joker to start infecting the streets of Gotham with his Joker toxin if a season 2 of Caped Crusader gets greenlit. But let us talk about the season as a whole and dive into some of the fun Easter eggs and facts that you could have missed. Episode 1 of Caped Crusader has the Batman facing off against the Penguin, but a different type of Penguin than Batman fans are typically used to from the comics, because this time around in the Caped Crusader universe, the Penguin is a woman named Oswalda Cobblepot, rather than the Oswald Cobblepot that made his debut in 1941's Detective Comics 58. But literally, who cares, to be honest, because Oswalda is just as ruthlessly brutal as the Penguin from the comics, with the first scene of the season showing us Oswalda dealing with a suspected traitor named Clarence, her own damn self, which is a damn shame because I heard that Clarence's parents had a real good marriage. And we would see her be just as ruthless later on with her own two sons, Aaron and Ronnie Cobblepot, during this episode. And as the episode continues, we see a group of gangsters working for local mob boss Rupert Thorne. And with those men getting special intel that they're about to get targeted, they try to move all of Thorne's illegal property as fast as they can before the cops or the Batman can show up. But unfortunately for them, the Dark Knight himself would soon descend upon them, sporting a design heavily based on Batman's Golden Age design, crafted by both Bob Kane and Bill Finger. And after Batman beats all of their asses like the traumatized psycho that he is, Thorne's intel proves to be solid when his warehouse soon explodes as a result of the Penguin's long-range umbrella cannon that she hid on her yacht that housed her Iceberg Lounge, with the Iceberg Lounge of course famously being Comic Book Penguin's nightclub ever since it was first introduced in the pages of Detective Comics 683 in 1995. But anyways, after this, Batman and Alfred discuss the explosion and come to the conclusion that Rupert Thorne is at war with another mysterious gang leader that he doesn't know about yet, and that he needs to stop their war before any of these explosions hurt innocent people. And during this first scene between Bruce and Alfred, we see that Bruce refers to Alfred by his last name Pennyworth, showing us a look at this Bruce Wayne's extremely closed-off personality towards anyone outside of himself, even his most trusted ally. And by the end of the season, when Batman learns the value of teamwork by relying on his new allies, Batman's gratitude towards his faithful butler would of course lead him to start calling him Alfred instead. This Alfred is of course a little bit chubbier than he is usually depicted in media, but that's only because this animation tries its absolute best to stay true to the original Golden Age design of Alfred back when he was first introduced in 1943's Batman #16 as Alfred Beagle. It wouldn't be until the 1943 Batman serial that Alfred's comic book design would be changed, as that live-action serial had a much thinner Alfred played by actor William Austin. So to reflect Austin's form, the character of Alfred was made skinnier and given the last name Pennyworth. After this, we meet up with Barbara Gordon, who was a black criminal defense lawyer in this universe, with this profession being a first for Barbara Gordon's character, as in the comics, Barbara Gordon originally worked as a librarian. This version of Barbara is immediately approached by Harvey Dent, who is working as the prosecuting lawyer in Barbara Gordon's case and is apparently also running for mayor, something that players of Batman the Telltale series are somewhat familiar with, as that Harvey Dent in that universe would become mayor of Gotham outright. Dent then playfully decides to play with the life of Gordon's client via a coin flip, something that Harvey Dent's character has done ever since the character Two-Face was introduced in Detective Comics 66. But anyways, in the following scene, we see Batman sneak past a woman that looks a lot like Harleen Quinzel in order to discover that a man named Wilfred Lee is responsible for falsifying the reports of the exploded buildings, with Batman interrogating Mr. Lee by dangling him upside down off the edge of a building while symbolically perched on top of a gargoyle, like Batman is famously known to do from time to time throughout the comics, as gargoyles are famously designed on the side of buildings to ward off evil spirits, just like Batman wards off evil bad guys from the streets of Gotham. And there was even a limited comic book series called Batman Gargoyle of Gotham, released in 2023. And I gotta say, I really think that the Batman mythos should straight up introduce a new member of the Bat family called Gargoyle, because let's face it, gargoyles fucking rule, and Batman and gargoyles go hand in hand. Then the scene transitions to Oswalda Cobblepot putting on a show at a Gotham police benefit hosted aboard her Iceberg Lounge yacht, with Penguin singing the 1902 classic, Won't You Come Home Billy Bailey, a very fitting song considering that this universe's Gotham is themed and set after a 1930s, 1940s America. And you can definitely see this when Cobblepot ends her performance by saying, 23 skidoo, I bid you adieu, before heading backstage, with 23 skidoo being a piece of popular American slang from the very early 20th century that points to someone leaving in a hurry. And before she leaves though, she flirts with officers Flass and Bullock, two famously crooked cops in the Batman mythos that she currently has on her payroll, with Arnold Flass making his first appearance in 1987's Batman 404 and Harvey Bullock in Detective Comics 441 from 1974. And nearby, Barbara Gordon and her father Commissioner Gordon have a chat about how much they hate being at this party, with Barbara Gordon wearing a purple dress with a golden necklace, evoking the purple and yellow colors of the Batgirl costume made famous by actress Yvonne Craig in the Batman 66 TV show. And not far from them, you can see Renee Montoya in a green dress chatting with two men in the foreground, before her character is ever officially introduced in the series in the next episode. Making her first appearance in 1992's Batman 475, Renee Montoya would eventually go from Gotham City detective to crime-fighting vigilante when she would take over the mantle of The Question from Victor Sage in 52, issue number 48 from 2007. A little later, when Barbara goes outside for some fresh air, Cobblepot's son Ronnie fails spectacularly at his attempts to flirt with her. Ronnie's shirt has a big old cocktail stain on it, with that cocktail stain looking a lot like a blood stain, a bit of symbolic foreshadowing for how he would be revealed as the actual traitor of the Penguin gang with blood on his hands. Then, after Mama Cobblepot mistakenly kills her son Aaron after assuming that he was a traitor, Ronnie's like, oh shit, she's onto me, I gotta get out of here, and hightails it to Barbara Gordon's office, seeking protection from her father in exchange for information that could put her mother in jail. Notice how Barbara Gordon is wearing a purple suit with a golden brooch this time, again pointing to the iconic purple and yellow Batgirl colors. And later, when Penguin finds out that Ronnie is the real killer, she throws her makeup at a picture of a young Aaron, a reflection of how she covered up his death by dumping his rat-looking ass to the bottom of the harbor. It truly is a rat boy summer. And after getting tipped off by both Flass and Bullock, Penguin then sends her men dressed like the original Penguin from the comics after Ronnie and Barbara Gordon, and the two are nearly killed if it wasn't for the intervention of Batman in his dope-as-hell Batmobile. A Batmobile whose design has clearly taken a lot of inspiration from the Batmobile from the 90s Batman animated series. Then when Ronnie tells the Commissioner and Barbara of Penguin's hidden boat cannon, they immediately move to evacuate the police station while Batman heads to the Penguin's yacht to stop her in his Bat-Sub, a vehicle in Batman's arsenal that made its debut in Detective Comics 147 from 1949. And as Batman is fighting the Penguin and her goons, Penguin refers to the Batman as Dracula, the classic fictional vampire, with Batman actually having faced Dracula in the past in 1991's Elseworld comic Batman and Dracula Red Reign, as well as in the Batman animated movie Batman vs. Dracula from 2005. But even though Batman did end up saving the day, he still would feel like he failed due to the police station still having been blown up and Rupert Thorne gaining more influence throughout the city. But anyways, moving on to episode 2, we have Renee Montoya looking into the disappearance of actress Yvonne Francis by interviewing Bruce Wayne, the last person to see her. But little did everyone know that Yvonne's longtime co-star Basil Karlo had kidnapped her after she rejected him following a drastic experimental chemical procedure that he undertook to make himself look less old and ugly for her. With this episode, of course, serving as the origin story for Basil Karlo's transformation into the classic Batman villain Clayface. When Basil Karlo was first introduced in Detective Comics 40 in 1940, his origin involved Basil Karlo getting super upset after he learned that a movie that he starred in the past called Dread Castle was getting remade with different actors. So this psycho decided to make himself a clay mask before attempting to murder all the actors in this reboot in the same order that they were killed in the original film. The design of Clayface from this Caped Crusader universe looks much closer to how he first appeared in Detective Comics 40 than the giant clay monster that we mainly associate with him today. In the comics, Basil Karlo's biology would not be mutated until 1989's Detective Comics 607, so until that point, he had to use his clay mask to change just his face. Also, fun fact about Basil Karlo's name, he was actually named after famous horror movie actors Basil Rathbone and Boris Karloff, which is something that I actually was not aware of until writing this video. But anyways, after Detective Montoya questions various people around Monoscope Pictures about Yvonne's disappearance, you can see that she does so in a brown trench coat, foreshadowing her future role as the Question, who famously wears brown and blue trench coats in the comics. And when Montoya is looking over photographs of Yvonne Francis while talking to a Monoscope Pictures employee, she's told that the dress that Yvonne was wearing was designed by real-life famous film costume designer Edith Head, whose appearance, of course, famously inspired the design of Edna Mode from the Incredibles movies, a movie series set in the same era as this series. And in one of those photographs, we can also see Yvonne attending a movie premiere for a movie that looks like it's called Gangbusters, with Gangbusters being a famous true crime radio show that eventually got adapted into a film serial in 1942, as well as a comic book series printed by DC Comics that ran from 1947 to 1958 with a total of 67 issues. And a little later, after Montoya discovers the fake dead body of Basil after he faked his death, Batman chases the real Clayface before he gets away. And then back at the station, after Montoya confers with Commissioner Gordon about her next steps, she walks outside of Gordon's office to see Harvey Dent cracking jokes with other officers, with Dent's story ending with him saying, "So I offered him double or nothing," which I felt was a piece of foreshadowing to Harvey becoming the double-faced Two-Face by season's end. And at the end of Harvey Dent's subsequent conversation with Montoya, he tells her that she'll want to be on his good side, another heavy-handed allusion toward Harvey Dent's demented demise as Two-Face. Then after Clayface kills another key member of the Monoscope Picture staff, we see Alfred watching some of Yvonne Francis's old movies, with Alfred criticizing her work by saying that she was no Gloria Swanson, a real-life actress who made an impact on Hollywood from 1914 to 1983. Not long after this, when Montoya is interviewing a costume designer, that costume designer mentions that the last movie that Basil and Yvonne worked together on was a film called Tower of Fear, which to me seems like a variation of the movie Dread Castle that caused comic book Clayface to go crazy in the first place. And later on in the episode, when Batman catches up with Clayface once again, the two start fencing with swords, with Clayface very much looking like the fictional character Zorro, a character that the Wayne family watched in the Mark of Zorro movie right before Bruce's parents were gunned down in Crime Alley, with Bruce taking some inspiration from the Zorro character when crafting his Batman persona. And after Batman finds the bodies of Daryl Manning and Lou Valentine, we see Detective Montoya calling for backup at the address 847 Lark Avenue, with Lark Avenue likely being a reference to DC Comics artist Michael Lark, who worked on a number of Batman comics. And after useless, crooked detectives Flass and Bullock ignore Montoya's call for help, she heads into Dr. Elman's place alone. And on Elman's walls are posters of some of Basil's past movies, like The Crimes of Dr. Z and Murders in the Wax Museum, with these movie titles pointing to the actions that Carlo was actually committing throughout the episode. Then, after Clayface knocks Montoya out, Batman would soon come in and save the day, with the episode ending with Montoya finding the audio device that Batman planted on her and her telling Batman that things aren't over between them two. And episode 3 is all about the rise of Selina Kyle, the Catwoman, who made her debut in 1940's Batman #1 as a thief trying to steal the necklace of some rich lady named Martha Travers. But in this series, she instead will eventually opt to steal Martha Wayne's pearl necklace instead. The same type of pearl necklace that Martha Wayne usually dies in throughout most of her incarnations. And in the spirit of this, the episode starts with Selina Kyle eyeing Martha Wayne's very necklace inside of the Gotham Museum, which I thought was fitting considering that comic book Selina Kyle would of course eventually take the spot of the next Mrs. Wayne when she would marry Bruce Wayne. And when some douchebag at the Gotham Museum get-together starts implying that Bruce's mom was stupid for walking down such a dangerous alley, Bruce punches that mother dang square across the face, causing a nearby news photographer named Eel O'Brien to catch the moment on his camera. And if Eel O'Brien sounds familiar to you, then you probably know him by his DC Comics superhero persona, Plastic Man. But instead of starting off as a thief himself like he did in the pages of 1941's Police Comics #1, this Eel O'Brien is apparently just a newspaper photographer for the Gotham Gazette. And unfortunately for Bruce Wayne, that punch would eventually land Bruce in front of Dr. Harleen Quinzel, the woman who would eventually become the Harlequin-themed criminal Harley Quinn by episode 5. And after having first appeared in season 1 episode 7 of the Batman animated series in 1992 as an original character, Harley Quinn would eventually join the DC Comics universe outright when she made her first appearance 7 years later in 1999's Batman Harley Quinn. And after Bruce Wayne resists Quinzel's attempts to let her in, he swipes the file that she has on him to see what she wrote, only for Harleen to predict Bruce Wayne's move by leaving a note for him saying, "See you next Tuesday," which was Dr. Quinzel's professional way of calling Batman the big. Then later, when a broke-ass Selina Kyle is going through her bills, we can see that Selina Kyle lives at 125 Luton Place, with this address being an Easter egg towards the Catwoman villain Valerie Luton, also known as Carnivora, who made her first appearance as Carnivora in 2003's Birds of Prey Catwoman Oracle. Then, after being inspired by the Batman, Selina Kyle ends up making a costume herself to do crime by getting herself a Catwoman getup that, you guessed it, came straight from the golden age of DC Comics when Catwoman first appeared. However, after Catwoman's first night out, she's quickly apprehended by the Batman, but is once again inspired by Batman's gadgets and fancy car before she inevitably tries her hands at thievery once again after being bailed out from consequences by Harvey Dent. When Detective Bullock is getting made fun of for Selina Kyle getting off so easily, Bullock tells Cohen to back the hell off, with Detective Cohen's full name actually being Detective Eric Cohen, a GCPD detective from the Batman comics with a loud and cruel mouth and a weird-ass sense of humor that made his first appearance in Batman 587. And that big mouth leads Cohen to call the facially scarred Bullock Scarface, a reference to the classic Scarface novel written by Armitage Trail in 1930 that was famously turned into a movie starring the Dunkachino guy. Then, when Batman chases Catwoman again, the two run across the roof of a place called Clowder Industries, with this being a fun little cat Easter egg, considering that a clowder is what you call a group of cats together. But Catwoman gets away with her fancy new gadgets and Catmobile, a car that originally appeared in Detective Comics 122 from 1947. And while reading of Catwoman's escapades in the Gotham Gazette, you can actually see another headline under Cat Crime Wave Continues that says, "New Leads in Arson Investigation," an article that likely teases the coming of Firebug in episode 4. Then, after Bruce's therapy causes him to relive the trauma of his parents getting shot by the street thug Joe Chill, Batman confronts Catwoman at the Gotham Museum, leading Catwoman to sick her Black Panther on him, with that panther being one of Golden Age Catwoman's most loyal pets named Diablo, a name that wouldn't be known to readers until Batman 355. But luckily Batman would foil Catwoman once again, with her former maid Greta coming in with the assist by selling all of Selina's shit so that she can't get bailed out this time. Episode 4 has the DC Comics villain Firebug as its main villain. Introduced in Batman 318 from 1979, Joseph Rigger became Firebug as a result of his family members being killed by different accidents all involving buildings, which gave this weirdo some type of vendetta against those specific buildings and would lead him to attempt to burn them all down to the ground before Batman would stop his crazy ass. But this Firebug in the show is purely enticed by the idea of everyone being one with the flame. So, That's kind of disturbing. But the only reason why Firebug gets released in the first place is because of Flass and Bullock. After the both of them are inspired to release a psycho onto the streets, after Montoya brings in Harleen Quinzel to try and analyze Batman's psychology, with the word Batman being written on the GCPD bulletin board with a hyphen in it, much like Batman's name used to be written with when he first appeared in Detective Comics number 27. And when Dr. Quinzel is giving this briefing to the detectives, she mentions her old college teacher, Professor Crane, with this teacher being none other than the Batman villain Scarecrow, aka Jonathan Crane. And then Harleen says that Crane used to tell her that anyone that works so hard to scare the pants off of you probably has some deep-rooted fears of their own, pointing to how Crane is an expert on human fear. So needless to say, the GCPD are trying their best to apprehend Batman, and while Batman is running away from their gunfire earlier in the episode, we can see that the Batmobile has several functions on its dash, including switches for a smokescreen, thrust boost capabilities, as well as a parachute. And not only did Batman get away from those idiots, he would soon break into the GCPD to look over all of their intel on him on their bulletin board, which is the most gangsta thing of all time, with Batman escaping off of the roof after Jim Gordon gives him a little chase. And as Jim watches Batman fly away, he stands near a spotlight that will undoubtedly eventually become the Bat Signal. But anyways, when Flass and Bullock go to release Firebug to draw out Batman, they call Firebug Firefly, which is the name of the more well-known of Batman's arsonist enemies who first appeared in 1952's Detective Comics 184. Brendan Fraser was of course cast as Firefly in the Batgirl movie, but unfortunately for us, David Zaslav is still a thing. But in the end, after lighting a building on fire, Firebug is killed by Bullock and Flass, and because of that, they are made the new leads on the hunt for Batman. But anyways, episode 5 is my favorite episode of the bunch because it centers around my favorite iteration of Harley Quinn that I have ever seen. Mostly because this Harley is a bit of a hero in her eyes, torturing her most sociopathic, greedy, and corrupt patients for the benefit of society, and making them all roleplay as characters that match their evil personalities. And what's even more messed up is that sometimes she uses her tortured patients to torture the other patients. Like how that dude dressed up like a baby beat the hell out of that guy dressed up like a king, all because Harley Quinn promised him more pudding, an intentional nod to how puddin' is Harley Quinn's favorite word in both the Batman animated series and comics. But some really interesting Easter eggs occur when we see Batman looking through a bunch of news articles in the Batcave in this episode. Like how this article has the headline, "Rare Flowers Found at the Site of Proposed Prison," which is a reference to Poison Ivy's first appearance in Season 1, Episode 9 of Batman the Animated Series, an episode where Poison Ivy seeks revenge on Harvey Dent for constructing Stonegate Penitentiary at the site of an extinct plant species. Then we have this little ad for a company that deals with bats in your basement, something that Bruce Wayne knows a lot about with his Batcave, and then a little later we see this headline that says Valestra Associates skips town, which is a reference to how Carl Beaumont and his daughter Andrea Beaumont were forced to leave Gotham for Europe when Carl couldn't pay the gang leader Salvatore Valestra back in Batman Mask the Phantasm. Sal Valestra would of course still manage to send a hitman to Europe to take care of Carl Beaumont, an assassination that would of course turn Andrea Beaumont into the vengeful Phantasm. Then after this we can see an article that says Hills-Reeves feud escalates, with this headline being a nod towards the mayoral election between Arthur Reeves, the Gotham Commissioner of Public Works, and the corrupt Hamilton Hill, with Hamilton Hill winning the election with the help of Rupert Thorne in the pages of Detective Comics 511, with Rupert Thorne famously manipulating Gotham politics ever since he first appeared in Detective Comics 469. And then of course we have a headline that says Carnival coming to Gotham, which is meant to foreshadow the Carnival shenanigans of episode 8. And then we have the headline Collins fined for reckless driving, which could be a reference to the character Charlie Collins from season 1 episode 7 of Batman the Animated Series, a man who commits a bit of road rage while trying to drive after some lunatic that cut him off in traffic, with that lunatic being none other than the Joker himself. And when Collins begs the Joker for his life after this road rage stunt, the Joker then lets him go after he makes Collins promise to do a favor for him whenever he asks, with the Joker eventually cashing in on that favor 2 years later. Another headline that says Stromwell drug charges dropped is a reference to Gotham crime boss Arnold Stromwell, who first appeared in season 1 episode 6 of Batman the Animated Series. Stromwell is also the uncle of Tony Zuko, the man that would end up killing Dick Grayson's parents. Then we have an article called Wayne Goes Wild, which is undoubtedly Batman's attempts to bolster his playboy image in the media, and not far from that article, there's an article that says, Scientist's daughter killed in accident, which points to episodes 39 and 40 of Season 1 of Batman the Animated Series, when we learn of how the scientist Carl Rossum lost his daughter in a car accident. Carl Rossum would create the supercomputer Hardak that would go rogue and threaten to replace the human race with androids. And then we see an ad for a nationwide best-selling book called How to Stop Worrying and Influence People, a book apparently written by Harley Quinn's former professor, Dr. Jonathan Crane himself, who once again becomes the Batman villain Scarecrow. The title of Crane's book is a parody of the real-life book How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, which is straight up a book that changed my life personally when I read it when I was a teenager. Like seriously, I owe my entire career and social life to this book, and I strongly urge everyone hearing this to pick this book up. It teaches you some pretty damn useful lessons about life and interacting with others. Like, it's fantastic. I cannot recommend it enough. But anyways, another headline says, Lawford to be tried separately, which points to the Batman villain Warren Lawford, aka the Fox. The Fox was part of a trio of bad guys called the Terrible Trio, and his two other members were called the Shark and the Vulture, and all three of them first appeared in Detective Comics 253 from 1958, while also being the main villains of Season 4, Episode 1 of Batman the Animated Series. But newspaper clippings aside, the last major Easter egg of the episode comes when Harleen is forced to end her date with Renee in order to go confront Batman at her secret playpen. She tells Renee to meet her at a place called Hoppers between Wilson and Lowry, with Wilson and Lowry being a reference to Lewis Wilson and Robert Lowry, the first two actors to play Batman in the 1943 Batman serial. Then episode 6 has Batman facing off against the Gentleman Ghost, a Hawkman foe who debuted in 1947's Flash Comics 88. And though Batman is reluctant to believe in magic at first, he eventually concedes and seeks the help of a man named Linton Midnight, the voodoo magician and John Constantine enemy known as Papa Midnight in the comics. Making his first appearance in Hellblazer #1 in 1988 as a Jamaican man, his ethnicity would change to Haitian by the time of the New 52, so he's sort of DC Comics' brother Voodoo in a weird way. And yeah, him and John Constantine do not get along. And when Bruce is denying the existence of ghosts in this episode, he quotes Sherlock Holmes author Arthur Conan Doyle when he says, "The world is big enough for us, no ghosts need apply." With Alfred then shooting a Doyle quote right back at him when he says, "When you have eliminated all which is impossible, that whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth." So if you're gonna work for Batman, your ass better be a Sherlock Holmes fan. And although the Gentleman Ghost would be stopped via the vial that Linton gave Batman, the most interesting part of the episode for me happens right before that moment when Alfred is possessed, as the Gentleman Ghost would tell Bruce that Alfred is hiding a significant secret from him. And while we don't get the answer to that secret in this episode, something tells me that it has to do with the night of Bruce's parents' death. Probably something that Alfred failed to do that might have contributed to their demises. But that's just my guess. Season 2 will undoubtedly get into all that if the show does get a Season 2. Then, before the very end of the episode, we see Harvey Dent looking at a picture of himself with the right side of his face covered with shattered glass. Another one of the show's many allusions towards Harvey Dent's brief future as Two-Face. Then episode 7 starts with a bang when Gordon is targeted by an assassin named Floyd Lawton, the Batman villain known as Deadshot, introduced in 1950's Batman 59. Some dude named Muller had apparently put a hit on Barbara Gordon and wanted her dead real damn bad, and to that end he hires the assassin Onomatopoeia to finish the job. Created by Kevin Smith in Green Arrow #12 from 2002, Onomatopoeia's true name has never been revealed, mostly because he spends all of his time speaking in onomatopoeias rather than, saying regular stuff like, "Hi, my name is Steven," with Onomatopoeia speaking in onomatopoeias by choice rather than because of some mental compulsion. And nobody really knows whether or not Onomatopoeia actually has any superpowers, but he has been known to take quite the beating in the comics, able to get shot by arrows and bullets and still keep going. And just like he's shown in this episode, comic book Onomatopoeia is an expert in hand-to-hand combat as well as a skilled tracker. And while Onomatopoeia is chasing Team Gordon, a cop named Marcus Driver is shot in the process, with Marcus having originated from the pages of Gotham Central #1 from 2003. And after narrowly escaping death, the group then head on over to the unfinished Wayne Gardens housing community. And while hiding out there, Barbara tells Renee that she was raised in Ellsworth Hills, which is an Easter egg pointing to DC Comics writer, artist, and editor Whitney Ellsworth. Then Jim Corrigan would eventually betray the group and try to collect on the bounty on Barbara's head like the corrupt cop that he always has been in the comics. But don't confuse this Jim Corrigan with the Jim Corrigan that will become the superhero known as the Spectre. This Jim Corrigan is based off of the crooked GCPD officer introduced in 2003's Gotham Central number 12. But luckily, the two Gordons would team up to take him down, just as Batman takes down Onomatopoeia. Episode 8's main villain is a girl by the name of Natalia Knight, also known as the criminal Nocturna in the comics, after first appearing in 1983's Batman 363. She would develop pale skin and a sensitivity to light after she was struck by a radioactive laser beam while working at the Gotham City Observatory. And just like in the show, Natalia is the sister of Anton Knight. But unlike the show, comic book Anton was a costume villain who went by the names Night Slayer or Thief of Night, with Anton making his first appearance in Detective Comics 529 from 1983. And throughout this episode, Natalia uses her vampire-like powers to suck the life energy out of several orphans named Dick, Jason, Stephanie, and Carrie, with these kids likely being Batman's future sidekicks Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, Stephanie Brown, and Carrie Kelly, who all donned the mantle of Robin at one point in DC Comics history. The Carrie in this episode even carries around a slingshot like comic book Carrie Kelly Robin does. But while Batman is looking for those kids, Harvey Dent is too busy dealing with Rupert Thorne on the side to care, with this episode giving us a fantastic transition from Harvey Dent's conversation with Rupert to this shot of a carnival banner advertising a two-headed man front and center, another nod to Dent's fate as Two-Face. And after Batman is brutally beat up by some carnival performers, he heads to his car while Alfred is reading a book called Alias, the Grey Ghost, which is a reference to the in-universe fictional hero the Grey Ghost, who is at the center of Batman the Animated Series episode Beware the Grey Ghost from Season 1, Episode 32. But after Batman rescues all the orphans from Natalia and prevents Natalia from dying in the sunlight vampire style, the orphans are returned to their caretaker, Miss Tompkins, a super important character in the Batman mythos, as Dr. Leslie Tompkins was a close family friend of the Waynes, who also helped Alfred raise Bruce following the death of Bruce's parents. And after Bruce Wayne would become Batman, Leslie would nurse a number of Bruce's crime-fighting injuries on the low, as well as those injuries sustained by Batman's kid sidekicks, with Leslie not exactly being the biggest fan of Bruce using children in his crime-fighting escapades. Leslie Tompkins first appeared in Detective Comics 457 in 1976. But while Leslie was reunited with her kids, Harvey Dent would unfortunately be united with a splash of chemicals to the face, courtesy of Rupert Thorne's hitman, Tony Zito, with those chemicals scarring the right side of Harvey's face, which is a lot different from the comics, as it is usually the left side of Harvey Dent's face that is typically disfigured. This then leads us to episode 9, where Harvey Dent's dissociative identity disorder causes him to feel like everyone around him is judging him. And when Bruce takes Harvey out to dinner, this paranoia would cause Harvey to grab their waitress and yell at her to say what she's really thinking, with Harvey's "say it" line likely taking inspiration from Aaron Eckhart's performance as Two-Face from 2008's The Dark Knight. Say it! And then later we see a sad Harvey walking down the street in a hat and trench coat, looking a lot like comic book Two-Face's original Golden Age design. This is of course before Harvey Dent's rage would cause him to shoot a mugger before heading to a local bar to intimidate Rupert Thorne ally Emil Potter into giving up some intel, with this scene again taking inspiration from Two-Face from The Dark Knight when Aaron Eckhart's Two-Face confronted that crooked GCPD detective at the bar before shooting him. After Emil would call Dent a freak, Dent of course beats the living shit out of Emil, messing up the right side of Emil's face so that he could look just as much of a disfigured freak as Harvey. Then after Harvey Dent would burn Zito alive for what he did to him, Dent would beeline it straight to Rupert Thorne's house and dispose a bunch of Rupert Thorne's men before being confronted by Batman. And during their fight, Two-Face would punch Batman hard enough for Batman to see double, symbolically pointing to Harvey's dual nature. But eventually Harvey's good side would feel remorse for his actions and surrender himself to the authorities, only for Harvey Dent to discover that Barbara Gordon had decided to represent him. And then in episode 10, Bruce Wayne would go to visit Harvey at Arkham Asylum, with Harvey quickly and accurately calling Bruce the Great Pretender, showing that Harvey is just as adept at reading Bruce as Dr. Quinzel was. and during their conversation, I have freaking loved the moment when Bruce accidentally slips into his Batman voice when he gets frustrated at Dent, because it shows that both he and Dent aren't all that dissimilar. Yeah, Batman doesn't have DID like Harvey Dent appears to have, but this Bruce Wayne still struggles with balancing his two personas, with his darker persona manifesting through severe trauma like Dent's did. But of course, Harvey Dent would eventually win his own battle against his darker side when the good man that he was sacrifices himself to save Barbara Gordon from being shot by Arnold Flass, causing Bruce to grab Flass's gun and shoot around his head before tossing his gun into the water, reflecting Bruce Wayne's immense distaste for guns after the death of his parents. However, this moment between Barbara and Harvey is super significant because it further evolves Barbara Gordon's disillusionment towards the system, a disillusionment that will undoubtedly lead her to becoming the crime-fighting Batgirl in the near future, likely in the show's potential second season. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this breakdown of Season 1 of Batman Caped Crusader. What did you guys think of the series? Let us know in the comment section down below. You guys can follow me at Mastertainment on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, wherever I am on the internet. But most importantly, subscribe to Heavy Spoilers. And when you do, hit that notification bell so that you can get notifications for every time we upload a video. And like always, do not forget to hit up the Heavy Spoilers store to pick up some Heavy Spoilers merch so that you can style on all your friends. And then maybe you can peer pressure them into buying some Heavy Spoilers shirts themselves. Peer pressure always works. Do it. Pressure your friends to do things. Don't do that. That's not nice. But only pressure them to buy shirts. That's the good type of pressuring. But yes, thanks again for watching this video. You guys are amazing, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.